Post-election sleep loss and relationship conflicts with Andrew Colsky, attorney at law and therapist. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact dependent. Hey everyone, this is attorney Mac Pierre-Louis, lawyer, mediator, arbitrator working throughout Florida and Texas, and welcome back to the LMI podcast show. This episode coming to you right after the election of President-elect Donald Trump in 2024 elections, and posting this right before Thanksgiving break, where people all around the country and the U.S. will be getting together with family and friends. So wanted to have this talk with Andrew Colsky, LPC. He is an attorney. He's a licensed therapist. He is a mediator who's done a whole lot of work on lots of different things, and who runs the nationalsleepcenter.com. And Andrew has actually been on the podcast before where he's talked about conflict resolution, and he's an author as well. Let me not forget to say that. Because you wear so many hats, Andrew, wanted you to reintroduce yourself to folks. Just take a couple minutes to tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into a conversation about sleep loss, something you are passionate about, as well as how to deal with conflicts in your interpersonal life. And go ahead, Andrew, tell us more about yourself.
Sure, great. Thanks, Mac. I appreciate you having me back on here. I'll try and put my background into context here so it makes sense, because it sounds like it's all these random things all over the place. But really what it's all about is, as an attorney, as a mediator, as a clinician for mental health, what my interest is how people think, why they do what they do, what's going on in their thought process to get them to take the actions they take. So if I'm working with a jury, from a legal perspective, if I'm working with two different parties or more in a mediation perspective, or even from a therapy perspective, it's all about what thoughts, what things got you to where you are, and then how do we get you to where you want to be. And so to me, in my mind, it all fits together well. And a lot of the similar skills are used in a lot of places. So that's what got me to where I am. I'm excited to have this conversation today because it brings that together. It brings together conflict and sleep and all the things that are going to be really relevant to people when they sit down at that Thanksgiving table.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so I wanted to screen share your website. First off, this is the nationalsleepcenter.com. If people want to contact you, get a hold of you, they can definitely go to this website and learn more about what you do. And it's not every day you meet an attorney who also specializes in sleep studies and sleep therapy. And I remember last time you were on, you actually were in Houston right before you came for the talk. And I believe you were here for a conference on sleep studies, right?
I was. It was the big annual conference. They call it Sleep 2024, and all the sleep doctors and researchers and companies, everybody was there.
Yes, yes. And well, sleep is something that we all need and something that will help keep us strong and healthy if it's done right. So appreciate your time. Now, the discussion today is because a lot have very strong feelings and strong emotions when it comes to politics in this country. We're a very divided country, as you know. That's an understatement in many regards. And recently, I was online checking out this article by on Time magazine. It was actually published the morning of election day, November 5th. And it's titled How to Sleep When You're Riddled with Election Anxiety. And it's just a coincidence that there's a alcohol bottle, advertisement right next to the article. Has nothing to do with it. But how to sleep when you're riddled with election anxiety. And in the article, it says that according to a recent American Psychological Association survey, 25% of adults have already lost sleep over the US presidential election, even before it skidded into its feverish final hours. And experts say, one expert said, I see 9 clients a day, and the election comes up in 6 of those sessions. A therapist in Columbus, Ohio. It's been on everyone's mind, and it's completely normal to struggle with sleep leading up to such a big election. So of course, when I read that, and look, I try not to lose sleep over these things. I have not lost sleep over these things, although the whole election thing has been on my mind, like for many people. But when I read that, and I'm realizing this is a big, big problem, in this country, I thought of you. So wanted to have you come on and discuss it. So why don't we start off with what causes sleep anxiety? First off, let's start from the very beginning. Why do so many people exhibit anxiety in their sleep?
Great question. I appreciate it. And there's a lot here. My personal approach to things, especially when it comes to sleep or any other mental health disorder, is a very scientific approach. So I always like to understand what's going on in the brain, what's going on in the body, what environmental factors get us to where we are. And the concept of politics as it relates to sleep is, as you said, very, very prominent right now. And if you speak to any mental health professional out there, they're probably going to tell you the same thing, that they see this uptick in calls and things from people because they're having this anxiety. And it's interfering with their sleep. It's interfering with their work. It's interfering with just their daily functioning in many cases. So let's talk about for a minute why that is and what's going on. So first thing is, when people are anxious about something, anxiety is worry about unknown things in the future. So, okay, we have a new politician in office, wherever it is, doesn't matter who it is or where it is, but I don't know what that person's going to do. I don't know how that's going to impact me. I'm afraid, based on political ads and whatever, that it's going to impact me negatively. So we have all these concerns about how is this going to affect me and the bigger picture in the future. And since it's the future, we're not there yet. We don't know. So we don't have an answer. And so what our mind does is it kind of spins in this worry loop, because we're thinking about all the possibilities and all these things, but there's no way to know. So you get caught up in that. So what does that do? Well, what that does is that causes this hyperarousal of our fight and flight response. And that's the response that we have, that we don't put it through our frontal cortex where we have all the complex thought. We just have those initial fears to try to keep ourselves safe and alive. So the body has this hyperarousal, and what it does then is it releases cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And so now we have elevated cortisol in our body that's keeping us on edge, ready for that fight or flight response. And then our sympathetic nervous system activates as well, again, preparing us for this fight or flight. We get increased heart rate, increased respiration, all the things you can think about when you're nervous and concerned about something. So that's the first thing that happens. Now imagine trying to relax or sleep or think about your job when all that's going on in your head, out of your control, right? Because it's your body is doing these things. You're not putting it through rational thought. So that's the first thing that happens. Next, we have this thing called gamma aminobutyric acid, GABA, G-A-B-A. And that promotes relaxation and sleep. But when we have anxiety, it reduces the GABA activity. So now the things that are supposed to help us get reduced, and there's less of that there. We also end up with this serotonin dysregulation, and serotonin is the thing that leads to the production of melatonin, which is the thing that makes us sleep, right? So now you can start to see how all these things are making it very difficult for us to sleep. And, just quickly, the other things that happen is we have these racing thoughts, we have sleep onset insomnia. I can't get to bed because my thoughts are racing. We have impact on the type of sleep we get. There's 4 different stages of sleep. We can talk about this later if you want to, but just generally. And there's more, but that's kind of basically, so our body is sort of taken over when we have these anxiety type of thoughts.
So all of that's happening inside of your body, but then what are the negative consequences that come from all of this?
Well, there's a lot. The first thing is that because our mind is racing, it's very hard for us to concentrate. So we have sort of this, I'll call it brain fog, because I can't concentrate on my work or my relationship or anything else because I've got this constant, stuff floating around in my brain. It makes it hard for me to sleep. It makes it hard for me to do the typical activities at work. So if I'm having a hard time sleeping, then I'm not getting good sleep. If I'm not getting good sleep, what does that mean the next day? It means I'm going to be sleepy the next day. Did you know that sleepy driving, for example, is more dangerous than driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol? Because we're so tired, and we may get to the traffic light or something, and we get what we call a micro nap. And you don't realize it. You're sitting there in front of your, car. You've got the steering wheel, you've got the gas pedal and all this stuff. And then you don't even realize that you quickly nod off. And then what happens? You get into an accident because you're not paying attention. You're not in control of the car. So there's a lot of consequences that come from this. And I'm going to tell you one other one that I've been researching lately, which is very scary. A lot of research is being done now, and a lot of the articles that I've been reading are literally from studies published in 2023 and 2024. Okay. And what we're finding is there is a big connection between sleep and dementia. And if you're not getting the right type of sleep, stage 3 sleep, then your brain, what happens in stage 3 sleep is your brain clears out all of the garbage and all the stuff, the plaque that builds up, the amyloid plaques that build up. And then that's what you see in dementia, is brains that have all this extra amyloid plaques in there. And so if you're not getting stage 3 sleep, your brain is not clearing that out. It's building up. And as we get older and older, there's more and more. And the studies are showing how that can lead to dementia. So there's a lot of reasons why we want to sleep well.
Yeah, so stress literally can kill you. Right?
Absolutely.
We've always known that, but now you're saying that there's more specific scientific research to back it up when it comes to sleep, lack of sleep.
Right.
For my education and for others, tell us the 4 stages of sleep again.
So sleep is broken down. Actually, they call it stage 1 sleep, stage 2 sleep, stage 3, and REM. So stage 1 is when you're just kind of, you're in and out. You're not really asleep yet, but you're not really awake. Stage 2 is you're sleeping. So you're not awake, but you're not into a deep sleep yet. Stage 3 sleep is your deep sleep. And that's where your brain and everything really relaxes. You start to get that washing effect of the plaques and those types of things. Your memory starts to solidify, which is why I always, for college students and things, they say it's better to, instead of cramming, go to bed, because when you sleep, your memory will improve. And then your REM sleep is that part where your muscles basically all kind of freeze up and your body's in such a deep state that the dreaming and those types of things occur there. So those are your 4 stages.
Yeah, well, of course, that's fascinating. I didn't want to stump you and put you on the spot, but I figured you'd have a good and quick answer for that one. Thank you. Sure. So you have what happens in your body, and then it converts over to the negative consequences that you experience, health-wise. But then it's going to impact your relationships as well. And it's going to inevitably come out in crankiness, moodiness. It's going to that stress is going to manifest itself, I presume, in how you discuss conflicts, and including political conflicts with other people. I've seen some of these quote unquote meltdowns on video, post election, where people literally are screaming into the camera because there's certain candidate didn't win. And I'm just like, that's probably not a good way to handle it publicly, especially for the long terms, because the internet is forever. However, people are trying to cope. They're trying to do what they've got to do. So, what are your recommendations? What are your thoughts? How do you reduce conflict at when in your waking up hours, where you're actually dealing with other people?
Yeah, and that's an important question to ask, and it's actually kind of interesting as you kind of dig into it, because as a therapist, when I'm working with someone who's having trouble that's related to all of this conflict, they need to get some skills and learn how to deal with it.
Yep.
And there's a lot of very common mistakes that people make, and then there's some things they can do to avoid those. So let's talk about some of those for a second. One thing is, if you're on, one side of the political spectrum and you have a family member on the other side of the political spectrum, the desire seems to be, oh, I'm going to convince that person to come to my side. And the chances of that happening are pretty much zero, right? Because people are right now anyway, with all the advertising and all the stuff that's been going on through the political angles, they're very polarized, and they're very, what we as a people in general have done through politics and all is we've come up with ways through social media, through regular media, through other things to very much create these little sound bites and these little clips to polarize people. But what you never see is an actual discussion about an issue. It's all about, how do I otherize the other person? How do I, and you see this all over YouTube and social media, is how somebody told somebody else off, how they put them in their place.
Them. Yep, slammed them. Yep, I see it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about, personal attacks. Well, that has nothing to do with the issues or anything. So there's a quote that I love, which is attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt. I'm assuming it is hers. She says, "Great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Small minds discuss people." And that's where social media tends to be at right now, is the small minds discussing people and very little of discussing ideas. So how does that all mean something to your audience? Well, here's what it means. If you're going to have a discussion, you're sitting around the table at Thanksgiving, tensions can run high with Uncle Bob or Aunt Sarah or whoever it may be, right? And so my advice to my patients is, number one, don't come into the conversation with the thought that you're going to change their mind, because you are not going to change their mind. Come into the conversation, if you have to have it at all, it's best to avoid it, but if you have to have it at all, come into the conversation with your curiosity hat on. And what I mean by that is this. You don't have to agree with them, but if you ask open-ended questions with the intent of just hearing them out, understanding their view, you may not agree with it. You don't have to agree with it. That's not the purpose of the conversation. The purpose is to have an open-ended conversation where you are curious. You don't respond. You don't try to, but you don't try to, change it. You don't use any of this. Yeah, well, that's stupid. None of these types of words are not helpful. Accept the answer and let it be and move on. Because what may happen is, number one, you may learn a little bit about what makes them think that way. And it may make them be curious to ask you something in kind. So, instead of focusing, this is like sort of a thing that I see that really bothers me. If I listen to the radio, you have C-SPAN, which is out there, and they do this thing where they say, Democrats call in on this line and Republicans call in on that line. Yeah. I think that should be abandoned immediately, because it says that anyone who identifies as a Democrat must think this way about all these issues. And if they identify as a Republican, they must think that way about all those issues. Well, they don't. People are individual. People have their own thoughts. They may agree with some of it, not other parts. They may agree with parts. So we need to cut that stuff out. We need to start talking about the issues. If you believe X on this issue, call in on this line. If you believe Y on this issue, call in on the other line. But we created this polarized otherizing. So you have to stop thinking of people as the other and talk about what is the issue. So that's the biggest thing to do in terms of those discussions, in my opinion.
Well, we recently had a guest on who wrote the book America in Therapy, and she basically said the same exact thing, and that is we oftentimes look at all this from a zero-sum game, where if the other person gets what they want, then I've lost, right? And there's benefit in opening the door for possible, for someone to possibly hear you out, and vice versa, so that you can see where there might be, places of mutual agreement. But if people simply close it out and automatically conclude that the other side is wrong, you're never going to get anywhere. So thank you for that, because in the next 10 days or so, once Thanksgiving, day gets here, I think a lot of Americans are going to be dealing with this. So what about practical tips, from you on how to reduce sleeplessness? Because that's going to obviously reduce, in my opinion, the interpersonal conflicts people might have as well. So how do you deal with the problem that we've been discussing today?
Right. Very, very important question. I'm glad that you asked that. So, there's a lot of things that I'll share with you here that are sort of quick tips that are meaningful. Obviously, the bigger picture is a bigger focus and more hard work to get there. But let's just talk about some basic tips to get started. So first thing is, if you think about pretty much anybody who says that they're having trouble sleeping, typically at least what I picture in my mind is a person laying there in bed. They got their cell phone in their hands and they're scrolling through, reading all the stuff that irritates them and getting themselves all worked up, right? They've got that blue light, in their face. Maybe they're watching TV. They have a big screen TV in their home because big screen TVs are relatively cheap these days, so everybody's got all that blue light hitting them. And they're not sleeping. They're laying in bed doing all this other stuff to amp up their anxiety. So the first thing is, if you're laying in bed, you don't have any screens, no iPads, no phones, no TVs, none of that stuff going on. You need to make sure that you leave that outside of your bed. There's a saying in the sleep industry, which is beds are for sleep and sex only, period. If you're not doing one of those in bed, get out of bed. And that's really important when it comes to insomnia treatment and other things. So that's one. The second thing you can do is, when you worry about something, like we talked about in the beginning of the episode here, you're going in this cycle, right? You're not getting anywhere. You're just worrying and worrying and worrying because you can't change the future. There are things you can do for yourself, but basically you don't control the whole future. So one of the suggestions is, before you get into bed, get yourself a little journal and write down all of your worries. That way your mind can say, okay, I'm not going to forget. I can come back tomorrow morning when I wake up, go back to and I can start worrying again. But for the night, I'm going to put it in the journal. I'm going to leave it there. And that was I can schedule some worry time, not in bed, before I get into bed. And I've done my worry time, and now bed means sleep. So that's another thing you can do. A third thing would be, in my opinion, when you are getting ready for bed, you have sort of this wind down routine that you can create. Normally people will go and they'll brush their teeth and they'll change into bedclothes and, certain types of things. But maybe you want to find a book or something to read that has nothing to do with facts or politics or anything else, just something fun, a fun story, short stories, something you're interested in, a hobby, but something that lets your brain think about something totally different, so that you're not, all amped up on politics before you go to bed. And then, my personal opinion, I don't like to see clients using over-the-counter sleep aids or prescription sleep aids because, we call them sleeping pills. They're really not sleeping pills. They're sedatives. Sedatives give you stage 2 sleep. So you feel like you're sleeping. You don't get stage 3 sleep, which means you don't get to that point where your brain is washing out all the plaque and all. So you're making yourself sicker in the long term. So it's all about good sleep hygiene. Do you have a comfortable room? Is it dark? Are all those LED lights of all those things turned off so that you get darkness? Is it quiet? Is it cool? Do you have, comfortable sheets, comfortable clothing? So these are things that we work on when we're dealing with people who have chronic insomnia. And then if you really do have chronic insomnia, which is 3 or more nights a week for 3 months or longer, where you have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking too early, then you can see a sleep therapist and they can work with you on something called CBT for insomnia, which is the gold standard and pretty much effective in about 75% of the cases. So those are just some quick tips for you.
Got it. Well, great quick tips. Thank you so much for that. All right. So if people want to, again, learn more, they can go to your website, nationalsleepcenter.com, and check you out so that they can see what other services you can provide. And conflict resolution.
I'm going to give you two.
Yeah,
I was going to give you 2 other tips there.
Yep.
So I also, within the last couple of months, I launched a radio show called Sleep Science Today.
Tell me about that.
So I have a website, sleepsciencetoday.com. If you go there, you can listen to the radio show. We also have it up on YouTube, so you can watch the radio show as we do it. And we talk about all sorts of sleep topics that are relevant to the average person and trying to get better sleep. I also didn't even think about it until we're talking now. I just came out with a new book called How to Sleep Well, or How Can I Sleep Well? It's available on Amazon. You just look up my name, Andrew Colsky, Colsky, and it's 150 of the most common questions about sleep answered with all of the research to support it. So it's a pretty thick book. But it covers all the questions that we have about sleep. So Sleep Science Today radio show, and the book might be helpful.
The radio show and the book will definitely be in the show notes so people can learn more about them and know where to get the book. Awesome. Well, Andrew Colsky, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on again and sharing your knowledge, which has been great and insightful. Okay, everyone. Until next time. Come back on lmipodcast.com and the YouTube channel, Spotify, and it's everywhere. So until next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.